Real quick, before we get started, I just wanted to say that I've now switched my placements of Thor Ragnarok and Winter Soldier in my overall MCU rankings. That's the only thing I changed because Ragnarok is hilarious. So, let's get into it. So I want to share some of my predictions. Characters being one-dimensional is something I'm definitely very afraid of. How could you not be worried about that with like the 50 million people they have in this movie? I think that Thanos is in the end going to have been very overblown as a villain. They're going to nerf him and nerf the Infinity Stones, and it's just kind of be like, this movie could go the way I want it to, and Thanos just wipes out nearly everyone. I would love to see that, but I don't think they have the guts. Rule number 1 of this channel: I am often wrong. Despite my hesitations and my general feelings about some of the MCU movies, Infinity War was amazing. I think it was absolutely the movie that it needed to be. I really appreciate that it was a movie for the fans. It didn't take time to explain things to people who are just seeing the MCU for the first time. It just got right into the action, had really subtle callbacks, but overall was exactly the movie that the universe needed at this time. To me, it almost felt like the first movie of a TV series where you've seen these characters grow for like 7-8 seasons, and this is finally their big debut on the screen. And I know that doesn't make sense because this is a film franchise. It just gave off the vibe of like, this is what it's all been leading to, like this is what we've all wanted to see. It completely proved me wrong about how far it would take it. I've seen this movie 4 times now, and I've enjoyed it so much every single time. So let's get in depth with it. Spoilers going all throughout the rest of this video. I'm not going to go through every character individually like I did for my last Shadow review because honestly there's just too many characters to do that with. But in general, I think that this is everyone's characters at their peak kind of essence, even when some of those characters don't really have a lot to work with. One of my main predictions from my last Marvel video was that the characters would all fall flat, and that definitely wasn't the case. There were characters that were extremely underdeveloped even in this movie's context, like for example all of Captain America's crew, which is really a shame because I wanted to see way more of Cap. But for the most part, I was very engaged and interested in everyone's characters. I thought that Thor was amazing in this. All of the Guardians were great and they were so in character. Tony's grown to a really great point. I think Doctor Strange is really interesting. Spider-Man's still my boy. I really like the new Banner Hulk dynamic, and I can't wait to see where that goes in Avengers 4. And the real standout character scenes, I would say, with the Avengers were Thor and Rocket scene, which is like really touching and just like great. And I also really felt for the scene where Loki died, and I thought Thor's reaction was great. And then the whole thing with Quill about the Shukamura, and big props to those actors too, because I think they really sold that. Speaking of Thor, Thor is massively overpowered at this point. Like, he is literally now just a god. There are some inconsistencies, I think, with what exactly his powers do and how they work. Like, he definitely should have been using his powers way more without his weapon, so I don't know why exactly that, like, supercharged him so much. I think this movie treats Ragnarok and the way that Thor grows overall fairly well. Like, Thor feels like a great blend of that Thor and then the old Thor that we know, but in terms of his powers and, like, the growth of how he understands his powers, I think that that was kind of weird coming from Ragnarok to this. And I think they addressed this in like interviews and stuff, but I hope that Valkyrie and Korg are alive. I definitely would like to see them, otherwise Ragnarok was like a really weird detour. The obvious runaway character in Infinity War is Thanos. He was so great in this. My prediction about him being a mediocre villain was absolutely off base and wrong. They did him perfectly. I really understood his motives. I felt the consequences of his actions, and I felt his presence throughout the entire movie. I thought it was cool that we could see how good of a fighter he is even without the stones, when he just decimates Hulk, and you can really see the differences in their style, where Hulk's just swinging, but Thanos has like these really planned, smart hits. I don't get the criticism from some people that this movie is trying to make you sympathize with Thanos, even though he's insane. I don't think it's trying to make you sympathize with him. I think you understand exactly why he's doing what he is. You can see that in his mind he loves Gamora. You can see that in his mind this is the only plan that will work to fix the universe. And you can see that when he didn't get to use his planet died. And when he did get to use his plan, those planets, at least allegedly, are doing really well. So you understand why he's doing what he's doing, but it doesn't make you want to sympathize with this person who's clearly insane. Another prediction of mine related to Thanos was that the children of Thanos would detract from him, and I don't think they did at all. I do think that they weren't super interesting. I think that Maul was the most interesting because he was the most developed, even as loosely as that is. And also 3 out of 4 of them could absolutely have been done with practical effects. Compared to Gamora and Nebula, who always look amazing in these movies, I don't get why they didn't just do makeup and effects for these pretty simple character designs overall. I get the big one, and I get Thanos, it's just easier to be CGI, but I think those guys totally could have been makeup and effects. That said, I am very excited that it's just Thanos against the Avengers in this next movie. One more thing with Thanos, I find it really weird that he doesn't outright kill more people, especially when he has the stones. Like when he's going in Wakanda and he's just knocking people about left and right. I don't get why, especially the Power Stone when he like zaps people with that, I don't get why he doesn't just kill them. I suppose that would be like biased in his mind, like that's not how he wants people to die and how he wants the universe to be corrected, but I still think it's kind of weird, especially because he does kill Heimdall in the beginning of the movie. Only other real character complaint I have is that I don't find Vision and Scarlet Witch engaging whatsoever. I think that in this movie, where there's already really relatable emotional relationships, especially with Quill and Gamora, theirs is kind of, I think, underexplored, and I think there's a lot of reliance on people knowing their relationship in the comics to feel about their relationship. But yeah, I don't really care about that whatsoever. I was not feeling the impact of that. Final character thing is that when I first saw Red Skull, that blew my mind. Like I knew that there was a possibility that he could be alive, but that was the first point, the first time watching through the movie. I was already fully into it, and at that point I was just losing my mind. This is definitely one of my favorite movie-going experiences, and having seen this movie on opening night with a full theater after having just marathoned the entire MCU was really the perfect way to watch this movie. It made it so much better, and it was already great. I really liked the music in this. I thought that the end credits music was great, and I also thought, I remember liking the Nowhere music a lot. I don't know why, I can't recite it exactly right now. And also when Cap's theme started playing when he showed up, that was like a great moment. Like I said before, I think the fan service was very subtle, but I think it was very well done. Like they don't take 3 minutes to stare at some stupid thing that we already know what it is. A lot of people are stating the obvious, where it's very clear that a lot of these people who died at the end of the movie are going to come back, but I'm still very surprised and very happy that they chose to do that ending. Even if they come back, my main gripe was that they haven't even showed death in like any of the other Marvel movies. We got Quicksilver. Other than that, no major deaths that have impacted us, or like no major characters that have died. I think that everyone does have an out to come back, with the exceptions of, I think Loki and Vision are the most likely to be dead forever, or at least Loki. But I do think that everyone has an out if they do choose to bring them back. Everyone with the snap obviously could come back with the gauntlet. Vision they could rebuild without the stone. I think Gamora is also in the Soul Stone. And I think that Loki, he was kind of off screen randomly for like a good minute or two. And I think that if they really wanted to be cheap, they could say that he escaped during that time, and that really was a projection, because we've seen his projections physically interact with people before. I hope they don't do that, and I don't think they will, but I think if they didn't really want to bring him back for some reason, that's the way they would do it. Everyone's been talking about the ending, and yeah, that was just perfect. I saw it opening night with basically a full row of my friends, and there's just a mix of just like shock and genuine just tears from all the deaths. There are obviously flaws in this, nothing to detract from how great it is. There were a couple things that bugged me. Some of the CGI, while most of it is great, some of it looks a little weird to me. I really don't like the nano Iron Man suit. It looks almost like pajamas to me sometimes, or like a onesie. Banner sitting in the Hulkbuster looks a little bit weird. Sometimes when Thanos interacts with things, it's a tiny bit off, nothing major. And then I think when Thanos uses the Reality Stone to like wipe away or show an illusion, especially when it's on Titan, that looks a little bit weird. Like, I know that Thanos is CGI, but even him standing in front of that looks like he's standing in front of a green screen. It's really weird. The pacing is very interesting because it's very different from the rest of the Marvel movies, but I think it's the only way this movie could have really worked with everything that's going on. And every time we bounced around to a different group of people, I felt that it was a good point to bounce around to. Another thing that kind of feels weird to me is I think Wakanda kind of feels off compared to how it just feels and looks in Black Panther. I think it's way more kind of clean and a little bit more sterile from like the bright, vibrant colors and the culture and all the really cool things from Black Panther. I noticed this watching back in Civil War too, especially in Civil War. Civil War, it's just like straight up a lab with just like super white, just like white coats. But I think Wakanda could have been done a little bit better. Maybe Ryan Coogler could have had more influence with the look of it, but like some of the guards and some of the clothes and stuff just didn't quite feel right to me. Nothing to ruin the movie, but I would have liked to see more of the cool, cultural, colorful Wakandan stuff come back. There's a weird duality in a couple parts of this movie that I don't know why they need to be there. Like, it's twice where one of the siblings know about an Infinity Stone, and then they have to watch the other sibling get tortured until they give up and tell Thanos or show Thanos the stone. And there's also the duality of Quill needing to kill Gamora. Obviously he couldn't or didn't. And then Scarlet Witch having to kill Vision. There's just a couple of those weird things that, like, I think it would have been made more impactful if it only had to happen once. I would like to see the weird connection between Tony and Thanos explored a little more. I mean, it could just be that Thanos knows that Tony blew up all the stuff in Avengers 1, but the way that Tony was talking about his dreams, and then the way Thanos says, like, burdened with knowledge, I feel like there's something really weird going on there, and I'm not sure what it might have been or what the cause might be. But I would like them to go into that a little bit. Finally, I don't fully know how I feel about the Infinity Stones so far. I think there's ones that make a lot of sense and work really well, like the Power and Space Stone are both pretty well developed at this point and we understand how they work. I don't get how the Space Stone can kind of phase matter. I feel like that might be more of a Reality Stone thing, but it didn't bother me too much. I felt it fit fine. The Time Stone's also okay. The Mind Stone is going to be, I think, kind of weird for Thanos to have, because hypothetically, I guess he can just mind control people. Hopefully we won't have to see half of the Avengers brainwashed or anything weird like that. The Reality Stone is completely different than how it was before. In Thor 2, it's kind of just like the Power Stone basically, with kind of, or like the Power and Space Stone combined. It's still kind of weird. I thought it would be way more powerful than they're explaining it to be, because so far he's only really used it to affect the perception of reality around him. And I mean, that could be pretty powerful, but I feel like overall it's kind of just like Loki plus. And then the Soul Stone is obviously the most vague of the stones, but I have a theory about that, which I'll talk about more later. To close up talking about the movie, I think that one of the most interesting parts to me was the deeper theme of "we don't trade lives," which is Cap's line when he's talking to Vision and then Vision repeats it to him, because I think that perfectly sums up the opposition to Thanos' plan. I know that theoretically he could use the gauntlet to make more resources or transport people to areas where there's food. Regardless of that, there is some proof that his plan does work, but the "we don't trade lives" line is the most important part of this movie, because it's a literal half for half trade, like the lives of half of the people for the benefit of the other half of the lives. And this is basically the overall explanation of that's not worth it. Every life is worth living. Even Gamora talking about how her life was happy even if they didn't have food all the time. And we also see that giving up one life for many doesn't even work a lot of times when Vision is killed but then brought back and Thanos still gets the stone anyway. So I thought that that was just kind of a smart little theme of the movie, beyond just like the big superhero fighting and beating Thanos and all that. I thought that that was actually a really cool part of this movie. So, what is going to happen in Avengers 4? Clearly, Doctor Strange, when he was looking in the future, saw one of two things. Either Thanos had to get the full gauntlet, or that Tony had to live. Tony having to live makes a lot more sense to me, because I mean, he could probably just lead with giving him the stone and make sure everyone in that crew lives. So first, let's figure out who's alive right now. We have Tony and Nebula on Titan. We have the rest of the original Avengers, assumably Hawkeye is alive as well, on Earth. We have Okoye, probably Shuri. I think we have Valkyrie and Korg, unless they got killed in the snap. Rhodey is alive. Rocket is the only remaining Guardian, and I think that's it. So my theory about the Soul Stone, as Red Skull says, it's the wisdom of the stones. So what I think is that you have to understand the power that you hold, and that's why it demanded a soul for soul, killing Gamora to gain its power. But I also think that Gamora is still in the Soul Stone, and that's that vision that Thanos had. I think that the Soul Stone is the way to bring back everyone, because I think that their souls are somehow trapped in the stone. So because of that, what I think the next movie is going to be is the entire remaining Avengers team teams up. I think that Rocket gets to step up and be more of the leader that he always wanted to be. I think that Shuri takes over as Black Panther, which I would love to see. Nebula helps Tony get back to Earth, or helps everyone meet up in some way. And then they go to find and kill Thanos and fix everything. Meanwhile, I think Thanos is being driven insane on Gamora's planet, which is where I think he is at the end of Avengers Infinity War. I don't know why I said the full name of the movie. And he goes so crazy that he's driven to, I don't know, kill the rest of the universe or kill the rest of the Avengers, or there's something that brings him off the planet, because otherwise it would just be the entire movie of the Avengers getting to the planet and then finding Thanos just kind of hanging out on his farm, and then they start to fight. And I think that throughout the rest of the movie, and then by the end of the movie, I think that a lot of the original Avengers are going to need to sacrifice themselves so that everyone can come back. I think there's something special about Tony and Steve, because Tony willingly sacrificed himself to save New York, and then Steve sacrificed himself. But so I have a theory that they have something special about them. They have like the weight of all of those souls that they saved with them, and I think that using that, those two are going to be able, after, you know, making up from Civil War, be able to use the Soul Stone and use that power within them to revive everyone. I think that includes Gamora. And yeah, I think that Tony and Steve are definitely dead at the end of Avengers 4. I think Bucky might go with Steve so they can finally kind of die together. Like, I think they maybe planned or wanted to. I think Banner might, just because I don't know how much more they want to work with them. Black Widow and Hawkeye I think are probably fine. They just kind of might retire. Or I could be completely wrong and it's more alternate reality or alternate timeline based, where he like zapped them to another dimension, but I don't think that's the case. I really think the Soul Stone is the most important part of this. And you know, for that final fight, we're going to get that big final scene of every single Avenger that we've seen so far just going in and kicking Thanos' ass. Oh, I also think that Pepper is 100% pregnant, because Tony's visions have shown to have some kind of merit, so I totally think that Pepper is pregnant, and that's going to kind of be a part of the next phase of Marvel. Other than that, the next movie coming up in the MCU is Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I am not super excited for it, just because after Infinity War, it's like, why do I even care what's going on in this movie? I heard that it's directly after Civil War and not even concurrent or very close to Infinity War, and I think that's pretty lame. So they're gonna have to do something interesting to make me care about that movie, or they can just go full on comedy, which I think would be a way better direction. I do like some of the banter between Ant-Man and Wasp, though maybe that's partially just because I like the radio filter and it reminds me of Red versus Blue. I think the villain from like the quantum realm or whatever alternate dimension, maybe she in part wants to stop Thanos, maybe. Hopefully it's tied in some way. I think Hawkeye definitely shows up in this movie at some point, so we know where he and Ant-Man are before the start of Avengers 4. And I think that either the end of the movie or an after credits scene is going to catch us up to the happenings of Infinity War. I think it would kind of be funny to just have Ant-Man and his crew just kind of standing over everything like we did at Gang, and then they all just die with the snap, and then Hawkeye has to go find the rest of the Avengers. I doubt they'll do that, but I don't know if they want to keep Ant-Man in the next movie, so we'll see, I guess. So in terms of ranking, this was a very hard movie for me to place, because After I watched it the first couple times, I was almost sure it was my new favorite. But I think looking back at it, one of my rules for my higher placed movies is that I could repeatedly watch it, and I think that this is such a heavy movie that also it's very important that you're engaged in the entirety of the MCU, that I think it will either fade for me over time or I'm just not going to be as invested. So I wanted to safely place it at my third favorite MCU movie. It could move up, but Iron Man and Spider-Man are just so self-contained and enjoyable, and I think that Infinity War is just a different type of movie that isn't made to necessarily be my all-time favorite, but it is a great movie. So that's it. I think that overall Infinity War is a very important movie for the feeling of the MCU, because there's finally some stakes, I think, or at least, you know, as much stakes as there can be knowing future movies are coming out and contracts and all that stuff. And I think this is a really important movie for all the younger fans of Marvel to see too, because there's kind of movies like the original Transformers and stuff like that where you have to realize that not everything is a fairy tale. It's not always a happy ending. So I'm excited to see where Avengers 4 goes. In terms of the movies that I've reviewed so far, it's definitely my favorite, and I definitely would like to expand my reviews into more non-giant Hollywood movies as well, because I think those are equally as important, obviously. It's just that I haven't really had the time to see them, and for now I'm just going to continue being a nerd. I'm going to be finally releasing my Tourist Tales EP within the next couple weeks, and I'm also going to try to make some gaming videos, so stay tuned for all of that new fun stuff.